As far as cliches go, records are made to be broken is an interesting one. There are so many competitive records that simply will never be broken because they were set during entirely different competitive eras, and as competition becomes better, records are more and more out of reach. In the NBA, Wilt Chamberlain's record 100 points scored in a single game will never be broken. It's so insurmountable that people don't even chase it, instead opting to chase after Kobe Bryant's legendary 81 because that somehow seems more achievable, and yet the cliche of records are made to be broken continues to exist. If I had to guess why it persists, I think it gives people something to aspire to, a tangible goalpost to push towards instead of just trudging ahead blindly. Some records set in the past may never be broken, but like Kobe Bryant's 81, there are achievements in modern history that may even supersede the ones in the past because of the context that competitive eras bring.
Islam Makhachev
is, at the time of recording this, the best fighter in the world. I don't think that it's particularly close, nor do I see a situation where he is surpassed without losing or retiring, as he is that much further ahead of the field in my opinion. In the process of becoming the best in the world,
Islam Makhachev has won 16 fights in a row in the UFC, tying Anderson Silva's record for the most consecutive UFC victories.
Someone getting this close to Anderson made me nervous for a time. For years, I viewed Anderson Silva's undefeated run in the UFC as Wilt Chamberlain-esque. It's unreachable, so people don't even bother trying.
Many people have gotten to 13 wins since, but now it is only Islam Makhachev at 16. There are a couple who are close, but Islam is at 16.
It's something that made me feel uneasy as a fan of Anderson Silva. This notch in his belt that he's held for so many years without a serious challenger finally potentially being wrested away from him just indicates that competition is, indeed, getting better, and that every day we march closer to the closure of the chapter of Anderson Silva's relevance in the history books, and with it, potentially my own fandom. Anderson Silva brought me into the sport, and if his greatest accomplishments have aged out of the MMA record books, maybe I have as well. This concern started to subside when I brought myself to really look into Anderson Silva's run in the UFC, and I wanted to talk about Anderson Silva's run as it compares to
Islam Makhachev,
as, at least on paper,
Islam Makhachev
is one enough to warrant the conversation. To avoid any suspense on what I believe, I don't think
Islam Makhachev's
run comes close to Anderson Silva's. I don't even think it's particularly close because while their win streaks may be similar, not all paths to the same achievements are equal. On the most surface observation,
Islam Makhachev
won the UFC championship, quote, the right way, grinding his way up from the bottom of the division to eventually fighting ranked opponents, to fighting top contenders, to finally fighting for the championship, winning it and leaving no question he was the best fighter in the division. This is incredibly admirable. It's the path of guys like Max Holloway and George St. Pierre, but because of this path, it leaves
Islam Makhachev
without much of a leg to stand on when compared to the greatest run in UFC history. Anderson Silva won the UFC middleweight championship in his second fight, and with each and every passing win just continued to push greatness again and again.
When Islam Makhachev won the UFC lightweight championship, he was 12 fights into his UFC career.
When Anderson Silva was 10 fights into his UFC career, Anderson Silva had already tied the UFC championship defenses record with 5, unified the Pride and UFC championships with his win over Dan Henderson, moved up a division to fight at light heavyweight twice, and knocking out former light heavyweight champion and then top 5 Forrest Griffin. Even in 2009, Anderson Silva had cause to be called the greatest UFC fighter of all time, and there really weren't a lot of arguments to be made to the contrary. The only thing that he didn't have on his side in 2009 was longevity, and even without that, he was already the most dominant UFC champion of all time, and as we now know, he was just barely over 50% of the way through establishing his credentials as a UFC champion. We flash ahead to the end of these win streaks, as we can't judge where these fighters were at the time. We have to judge the run as if it is a finished product. If
Islam Makhachev
lost his next fight,
winning 16 in a row, tying Anderson Silva's record for most consecutive UFC wins,
he would end with
6 total wins in title fights, 4 total title defenses.
Because of fighters like Anderson Silva and Demetrius Johnson, 5 title defenses is a mark that feels like it should be able to be surpassed with regularity since being set by Tito Ortiz from 2000 to 2002. But of the 91 unique title reigns since Tito Ortiz set that mark in November of 2002, there's only been 10 of them to either match or surpass the number of consecutive defenses.
Islam Makhachev
has a great claim to legacy, but again, we aren't talking about his own personal corner of MMA history. In this situation, He is being compared and contrasted with the greatest UFC fighter to ever exist. During Anderson Silva's title reign, where he won 16 fights in a row with 10 title defenses, Anderson Silva set a lot of tangible records, which means that they aren't explained down to the absolute most finite definition in order to accredit him with a record being achieved. No, in Anderson Silva's UFC run, by my count, he achieved these 10 overall records. Most wins at middleweight, most consecutive wins, most finishes, latest finish, most knockouts, most submissions in middleweight title fights, highest significant strikes landed percentage, most knockdowns, longest title reign in both days and defenses, and most bonuses won. Now, these are just overall records, and it doesn't really go into the breakdown of them where he still holds most of them. He no longer holds the record for most finishes in the UFC, but he still holds the record for most finishes in title fights and most finishes at middleweight, title or non-title. Basically, every striking-based record for title fights is a record that Anderson Silva still holds. Most knockouts, most knockdowns, highest significant strike percentage, etc. It's a mark of greatness that
Islam Makhachev
cannot ever hope to achieve because of both his fighting style and the trends in the sport as compared to previous eras. Not to mention, he isn't able to achieve any of these records because, well, Anderson Silva set them all. I don't make this video to bash
Islam Makhachev.
Once again, I think he's the best fighter in the world and the best champion the sport has had since Demetrius Johnson lost. But this is a testament to just one facet of Anderson Silva's greatness when it comes to the sport of mixed martial arts.
Islam Makhachev
Became the best fighter in the world in
2023.
and it's a feat that has to be applauded. There have only been so many fighters who can claim themselves as the single best fighter in the world, but unfortunately for
Islam Makhachev,
he just doesn't have the body hours to be able to catch Anderson Silva. At
16 in a row.
a mark Anderson reached in 2012, Anderson had been the best fighter in the world for the better part of 4 years. He wasn't just talked about as the greatest middleweight of all time. He was being talked about as the greatest fighter who had ever, and maybe would ever, live. Anderson Silva is the greatest fighter of all time, and it doesn't matter how many wins in a row a fighter will get. Anderson Silva's greatness and impact is the most hallowed mark that MMA will ever have the opportunity to have been a part of. Celebrate greatness as it happens. Put your arms around
Islam Makhachev.
because when he's gone, I promise you, you will miss him.